If you've been paying attention for the last several weeks, I have been harping pretty hard on this idea of extemporaneous speaking or speaking from notes. In this module, we are going to talk about the different methods of remembering your speech and how that impacts your delivery. One of the reasons I've been emphasizing this extemporaneous speaking is because it makes your delivery more conversational and more natural. But there are lots of other reasons. But before we get to those, this video is going to be pretty brief. I do want to review the other ways of remembering speeches and when it is most appropriate to use each one of these methods. There are no hard and fast rules. It's blurry sometimes. It depends on a lot of different factors, not just one factor. But I'm going to go through these four types and the main occasions that we see these types of speaking. First, we have impromptu speaking. This is often what gives students a lot of anxiety, this being put on the spot. This class has really not been focused on impromptu speaking. Some of the mini speeches would be considered to be more impromptu. They're low stakes, they're not a lot of points. You don't have to cite sources, but you still probably spend 5 or 10 minutes preparing for that. And that's impromptu when we're comparing it to, spending several hours preparing a speech. But oftentimes, if you are in a class and you raise your hand and you're called on, that's impromptu speaking. If you are just in a conversation with your friends and family and you speak up, that's impromptu speaking. If you join the debate team and you are practicing your argument, you'll pull a topic out of the hat and you'll debate it. So often, this is what that refers to, the idea that we're pulling something out of a hat and you're preparing a speech with very little preparation, or you're just answering a question on the spot, you're in an interview, you're in a class. Sometimes in a special occasion setting, your speech might be a little more impromptu or on the spot. So if you're having or attending a birthday party and say someone at the party's like, let's all give toasts for Jessica. That's a little more impromptu than a wedding speech, for example. They're both still toasts, but in the first setting, it's super casual, probably 30 seconds, 45 seconds. That's it. In a wedding toast or another more formal celebration, like a retirement party or something like that, a little more goes into that and it's a little longer, a little more formal, and that's where we get to memorized. So this is completely memorized. You have nothing. This is the other extreme of what freaks students out because in a memorized speech, the biggest risk is you losing your train of thought or you losing your place. And that can derail your whole speech. That's why we're not asking you to formally put together a memorized speech with all of the citations and all of the different references and examples and definitions, because that's a lot to remember. There are certain situations where a memorized speech is warranted. The wedding toast is one. Sometimes, again, that wedding toast, it could be, or the toast genre of speech could be impromptu, it could be memorized, or it could be extemporaneous, where you take some notes up to the front of the room with the microphone and you give your wedding toast. The risk with that is it can be distracting and kind of rude. So usually in a special occasion speech, we are aiming for memorized. Again, eulogy, you really don't want to be fumbling around with notes or like reading from your iPhone when you are delivering a eulogy. And it might be a long time before you are ever asked to deliver a eulogy, but the chances are very high that you'll be asked to honor someone that you love after they have passed. So I hope that doesn't happen anytime soon, but just know that these are the occasions that call for a memorized speech. We're not getting citations in there, we're not getting dates and people's names. Memorized speech is speaking from the heart. You know exactly what you want to say. You may practice it, half a dozen times, and you have it completely committed to memory, even if you don't say the exact words the exact way that you plan them out. It's still memorized because you're not referring to any notes. Another occasion for a fully memorized speech is sometimes a political speech or an inspirational or a motivational speech. I mean, just think about it. Footage of Martin Luther King Jr. delivering his I Have a Dream speech, which is known as one of the most powerful speeches in American history, flipping through note cards or fumbling with a crinkled piece of paper. It just kills the mood. So, a lot of this delivery and memory style has to do with mood and it has to do with appropriateness. And his, his speech was so beautiful, and he also wasn't reading from a script. This was completely memorized. It's not quite impromptu because he definitely prepared that speech, right? All of the metaphors that were included, the rhetorical devices, that was planned and it was memorized. Finally, I think this is the last example for memorized. If you're acting, if you do any kind of theater, you have to memorize your lines. And you spend so much time running through your lines, rehearsing, going off script so that you have it completely committed to memory. But we're not in an acting class, and you are not delivering a play. You're delivering speeches. And you're delivering them extemporaneously. Off the cuff, with some notes you have prepared ahead of time, but you are not relying on the notes to the point where you're reading. This is our glorious middle spot. You have it committed to memory, it's internalized, but not to the point where you sound over rehearsed or canned, which is one of the critiques of some political speeches, not necessarily Martin Luther King, but some of your run of the mill campaign speeches can sound really just standardized and like they're all the same. So extemporaneous, we're speaking from notes. We have a conversational style. So I'm going to give you about 4 major reasons why we are emphasizing extemporaneous speaking in this class. And up to this point, I've already given you reasons why the other forms are not ideal, and we still haven't gotten to manuscript yet. But extemporaneous speaking is what allows you to speak in a speaking style. It sounds weird, but impromptu is conversational, but extemporaneous, we have this element of preparation and you are preparing something. Like you have time, you're putting it together, but you're delivering it in a way that's natural, conversational. Sentences are short. There's a natural rhythm with your pausing that even with so much practice on a manuscript speech, which we'll get to next, it's still going to sound like you're reading. It takes so much practice to be able to read an entire manuscript and make it sound like you're not reading. It's so hard. And that's why I've been mentioning to you all that I can tell that you're reading, and it's because I have a trained ear, right? I've been doing this for a long time, so it's not that I'm trying to make you feel bad or anything like that, but it's so hard to get yourself to that level where you're just reading from a script and you sound like what I'm sounding like right now. It's just hard to do that. And so you're all giving yourselves more work when you do that. Second reason, engagement with the audience. In addition to your voice and your vocal delivery, you're making more eye contact with the camera. If you have a script in front of you, you're going to look at it. If you have an outline in front of you that's super detailed and basically a script because every sentence is on there, you're going to look at it and you're going to read from it. But if you're speaking from notes with some key words and some cues, you're going to speak like I'm speaking right now. I have a little notepad with these 4 reasons that I want to make sure I convey to you. And I'm not reading from that notepad. Everything that's coming out of my mouth right now is not written down on that notepad. I'm just speaking from a little list of notes. The third reason we prefer extemporaneous speaking is this notion of memory. It is not memorized, it is internalized, otherwise known as the know your shit rule. When you speak extemporaneously, you are making it very clear to the audience that you know what you're talking about, that you have expertise in this subject. You've done your research, you've done your homework, you've planned this out, you've organized it, you've rehearsed it a couple times to the point where you probably don't need to look at your notes at all. However, that's still not memorized, because memorized would be every single word. You practiced it exactly the same way every single time. Every word is the same every time you practice it. That is memorized. But it's committed to memory, but it's not memorized. It really is that sweet spot. And that internalization gives you credibility, as I've said. Think about this. Most people can read. Most people can read out loud. I know that can be a taken for granted assumption, and there are certainly people and students out there who have trouble reading out loud, and I want to acknowledge that. But what we are teaching you how to do is how to speak, not how to read out loud. The last reason I will give you for this emphasis on extemporaneous speaking is that because you have notes and you've prepared them, it ensures that you have a structure. You could memorize an entire speech that's really disorganized and really poorly structured and hard to follow. And congratulations, you memorized it. But it's not achieving what you want it to achieve because it's disorganized. So this process of outlining and converting those outlines to speaking notes, that ensures clarity, structure, organization. It helps avoid rambling, because sometimes with memorized speeches, we can go off on a tangent and start rambling about something else. That definitely happens in impromptu speaking. It does not happen when we're speaking from a script, but it is very unlikely to happen if you are referring to your notes, getting yourself back on track if you find that you are getting off on a tangent. So those are the 4 major reasons I'll give you for why extemporaneous speaking is preferred. Hang with me for this last one before you rush to complete that Canvas quiz. So some occasions in addition to speaking in this class, giving a pitch at a work meeting, you're going to want to speak from notes. If you are or want to be a teacher, you will want to be able to speak from notes. You often do not memorize your lesson because things could happen. Students could react a certain way, they could have different questions. So you're not memorizing that lesson. You have notes, you are addressing what comes up in class, you're referring back to your notes to get back on track. To a certain extent, preaching is also extemporaneous. A lot of it is memorization on the part of the preacher, the pastor, the priest. But I mean, if they're reading passages from the Bible, or if they are, they don't want to forget something and they refer to their notes. And that's sort of a hybrid of some reading, some extemporaneous, and some memorized. Okay, finally, manuscript. The bane of our existence in Com 111, manuscript speaking. A lot of you are doing this. And as I said a few minutes ago, you're making it harder on yourself when you do that. And I know it's intimidating to just sit in front of your computer and start talking. I get it. Prepare good notes. Don't read from a script. There are very few occasions that warrant a script. We need a script when the information is so important in terms of accuracy and getting all of the details correct, like a newscast, a news broadcast. We can't be speaking off the cuff for a news broadcast. We need to make sure that we're saying the correct information in a newscast. And they're not going to memorize that information. They usually have some notes in front of them, but they're reading from a teleprompter. And you know what? It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell because they are trained in doing that. Some other political speeches use teleprompters, such as the presidential State of the Union address. Again, we really want to make sure we're not missing anything, we're not forgetting anything, we're getting it right. In your speeches in Com 111 and in any of the other speeches you give in, probably the rest of your life, you're not going to need a script. A script is only going to hinder you. So please ditch the script. That should be the title of this lecture. So in order of most memorization to least memorization, obviously fully memorized here at the top, most, like, you are rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing, getting every single word exactly the way you want it every time you're rehearsing. You're not missing a step. Manuscript, you are not necessarily studying it in the same way because you have it in front of you. However, if you get off script, you do need to know how to get back onto the script. Extemporaneous, we've got notes, and then impromptu, no notes. So there really is no process of memorization or internalization. So I hope this clarifies things. Again, it's not because I want to make you feel bad or make you feel insecure. I'm pushing you out of your comfort zone. And I know that reading an essay in front of your camera might be in your comfort zone right now, but I'm telling you, that's not going to serve you in the long run. So take the opportunity over the next several weeks to really prepare. So think invention wise and arrangement wise, and also style, but prepare those notes, rehearse, internalize, don't memorize. The more you know your shit, the better it's going to go for you. So that's my advice. And thank you for listening.